Hey guys, so I am back and I'm here to do a review for you for the new Tarte Tartelette Amazonian Clay Matte Palette, which is quite a mouthful, but it is a new addition to the neutral palette market, and I thought I'd just jump into a review so you guys can see if this is something you're interested in checking out. So the Tartelette palette is actually not scheduled to be released until spring 2015. It's a part of Tarte's spring 2015 roundup, but they did a little pre-sale preview event for 5 days from November 16th to the 21st where limited quantities were available for purchase, and if you signed up to their website for emails and newsletters and stuff like that, you got an email link, a special link that you could go ahead and purchase this palette early. So when I got the email, I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, yeah, another neutral palette on the market. Do I really need it? Do I even want it? But then after a couple of days, I broke down, and the blogger in me was like, you need to get this in case it's awesome and share it with your viewers. So I did end up picking it up, and I must mention that Tarte has amazing shipping. I received this the next day. That's how quick their shipping is, and it's free over $40. So if you ever want any Tarte products and you're not going for points or anything from any other website, Tarte is a good place to go and shop because their shipping is like this and they really have great customer service. So I haven't had any issues with any orders that I've placed with them, and again, I get my products like next day or the next 2 days. Just putting it out there just in case you were wondering about Tarte's customer service. So let's just jump into discussing the palette because I know that's what you're here for, right? Yeah. So the Tartelette palette is a 12 eyeshadow palette, and they're filled with 12 exclusive matte shades that are brand new to Tarte, and I feel like neutral palettes have been taking over the market lately. And it started with the naked palettes from Urban Decay. When those debuted, everybody like had a fit over them and they went crazy for them, and then other brands started jumping on the bandwagon. And I feel like now that it's kind of settled a little bit, the matte palettes are joining the ranks. Like the matte neutral palettes are the ones that are kind of taking over and kind of weaseling their way into the market. And Tarte came out at the right time when we're fiending for great matte shades. So there are 12 exclusive shades in this palette that have never been released by Tarte before. So if you have other palettes from Tarte and you're worried about duplicating shades, these are 12 exclusive brand new shades, so you won't be overlapping anything in your collection. So the palette will retail for $44, and as I mentioned before, there are 12 eyeshadows, and each of the eyeshadows are 0.053 ounces. Now, when you hear that size, think of an Urban Decay single eyeshadow or a MAC single eyeshadow, the smaller sizes. These are 0.05 ounces each. So you're getting a full-size MAC shade or a full-size Urban Decay shade. The typical smaller sized eyeshadows, these would be the same size as each of these eyeshadows in this palette. So on average, you're going to end up paying $3.66 per eyeshadow in this palette. And as far as how these compare against other palettes on the market, if you think of the Urban Decay Naked palettes, the most popular neutral palettes on the market, the Urban Decay neutral palettes have 12 eyeshadows each, and they have 0.05 ounces per eyeshadow. So you're getting the same amount of product as you would in the Tartelette palette. You do get an extra little dual-ended brush, and they do give you sample size of their primer potions. The brushes for me they're not bad brushes, but I wouldn't typically use them anyway, so they're kind of throwaway brushes for me. They're decorative in nature, and these palettes are $54. So there was a $10 price increase over the past 3 years for Urban Decay Naked palettes. When they started out, they were $44 each. Now they're $54. So you're paying $10 extra for, I guess, the brush for this palette over the Tartelette palette. There is also another very similar looking palette on the market. This is one of the Stila Eyes Are the Windows to the Mind palette, and this is the all matte neutral palette in the lineup from Stila, and these retail for $49 each, and they also contain 12 eyeshadows at 0.05 ounces each. So again, the same amount of product you're getting in this palette, but you're paying $5 extra for the Stila version. Another one that you may think of is the Lorac Pro palette, which is another neutral palette on the market. It's not all matte, but it does have 16 shades over 12, so there are 4 extra shades here, and you get 8 mattes and 8 shimmers for those of us who don't want an all matte palette. This palette retails for $42, so it's $2 cheaper, but these eyeshadows are only 0.02 ounces each, which you end up getting a total of 0.32 ounces, so you actually end up getting less overall for these eyeshadows. And that may not matter to you, that you're getting less product, but you're paying $2 less, but the value isn't the same. The value is less than the Tartelette palette, believe it or not. You're getting more eyeshadows, but you're getting less product, and that comes into play when you like an eyeshadow and you keep on using it. You're gonna hit pan really quickly on these eyeshadows because they're like, each of them are half the size of the ones in the Tartelette palette. So for me, a neutral palette that I'm gonna use over and over and over, I kind of want larger sized eyeshadows because that means I'm gonna get more use out of it than to just have an eyeshadow that I run out of and then what, you know? Overall, I think Tarte is coming in at a great price point at $44 for this palette, because when stacked up against the competitors on the market and the other mid-range brands, it's more reasonable. You get more product if you really stack it up that way. If you really compare the palettes, you're getting more eyeshadows, you're getting a good price, and you're gonna get a lot of use out of these eyeshadows. So I think price point wise, Tarte really hit it out the park. They came in, they did their market research, and they really chose a great price point. Next up is the packaging, which I think Tarte has been listening to various bloggers and vloggers and reviewers of these products, and they came out with a great design for their palette. It's kind of reminiscent of the Stila Eyes Are the Window palette with the kind of golden reflective packaging. It's hard plastic, but it has a shiny reflective surface, which I do and don't like. I like how pretty it is and luxurious it looks, but it holds fingerprints. As you can see, it holds fingerprints like nobody's business. It's hard to keep smudge free, and that's the only drawback to the palette. But the palette itself is very thin and sleek, as you can see. Compared with the Stila palette, it's actually thinner than the Stila palette, and one of my thinnest palettes in my collection would be my Lorac palette, and if you see them together, they're almost the same thinness, with the actual lid of the Tarte palette being probably the extra bulk on this palette. Now, aside from that, it has a purple detail, an ombre purple here, really pretty. I really like the color theme. It's gold and purple. Tartelette printed on the front, Tarte on the back, and then some product information and manufacturer information on the back. Now, when you open it, you will see a full-sized mirror, so you'll have a full mirror. So for those of us that like to apply eyeshadow with a palette mirror, this is a great handy mirror. It also has a hinge that stays locked. So it's not quite 90 degrees, but it's a little bit over 90 degrees. So you can see into it and apply your eyeshadows without having to hold it in place. Like, for instance, the cardboard packaging of the Lorac Pro palette, it falls, it flaps over, and you would have to hold it in place to actually use the mirror. This one, you can actually use the mirror. You can set it on your table and use it. The only thing that I would complain about, the hinge doesn't go all the way back, which to a typical consumer, that's not an issue. But when I'm showing you eyeshadows and I'm trying to take pictures, it becomes a little annoying, and when I'm using it in a tutorial, it becomes a little annoying. I'm just saying that just to be a nuisance, but to a typical consumer, a typical makeup user, that shouldn't be an issue. And then inside, which I think is the biggest improvement Tarte made, they actually have the names of the eyeshadows printed on the actual insert here. So you have all the names under each eyeshadow, which they usually have this little transparent sleeve that they print the names on, and then you're supposed to line it up and call out the names, and ain't nobody got time for that. And they're actual names rather than numbers, so it's easy reference, especially in this age of oversharing on social media. And if you want to tell somebody what you used in a look, it's really easy to reference. So I think that is a great touch. Thank you, Tarte, for listening to us bitch and moan about the actual names of the eyeshadows. So overall, I think the packaging is really great. I think it's a great improvement. It is a snap fit tab closure, and the closure is pretty secure. and I've dropped this and it didn't pop open. I think it would be great for travel. It feels very sturdy. It doesn't feel like flimsy, like it's gonna break. It actually is a solid packaging, and I really like this packaging. I actually really like it over most of the other packaging. I think the only thing that people might say is they wanted a transparent lid, but you're not gonna get that with a mirror, so it's a trade-off. You get a transparent lid, like the Art palettes that you can see through, which I think looks a little bit cheap, or you get a mirror and a little bit more luxurious feel. I think this palette design is amazing, so kudos, thumbs up to whoever designed the packaging for the Tartelette palette. So after all that, I'm sure you just want to see what these eyeshadows look like and how they perform. You want to hear all about that. Now, the way Tarte did it is they organized it in 3 different rows, and the first row is more yellow toned, so more yellow, warm toned neutrals, and then the second row is more rosy, pink, cool tone neutrals, and then the third row hits me as more of a neutral tone. So it ranges from highlight shades to medium tone shades to blending shades, transition shades, and then a deeper, darker shade for either lining or darkening up a look or smoking out a look. So they arranged it beautifully. It takes the guesswork out of it. You know where the highlight shades are, you know where the blending shades are, you know where the neutral shades are, you know where the rosy shades are. So I think it was beautifully laid out, beautifully designed, and I'm gonna zoom in so you can see the actual colors, and then we're gonna go into the swatches. So here are the 12 eyeshadows. Like I said, you have more yellow tone neutrals in the first row, rosy cool tone neutrals in the second row, and then neutral tones in the last row. First up we have Free Spirit, which is a cream shade. Then you have Force of Nature, which is a nude shade. Dreamer is a warm brown. Multitasker is a chocolate brown. Then you have Caregiver, which is a pale pink. Natural Beauty, which is a mauve. Best Friend, which is a mulberry color. Bombshell, which is a dark plum. Super Mom, which is an ivory shade. Wanderer, which is a light brown. Power Player, which is a taupe. And then Fashionista, which is a black. Now the names also have a theme where it's either you're a free spirit, a super mom, or a power player. They're trying to play on the various personalities that women display, and I think that is actually a fun little theme to have for this palette. And again, those are the highlight shades, the medium tone blending shades, the deeper transition shades, and then the final smoky dark liner shades. So here's the first row with the warm tone, more yellow tone neutrals. Now I don't normally do this, but I'm gonna try to do live swatches with the brush on my hand so you can see the pigmentation and payoff of these eyeshadows. So first up we have Free Spirit, which is that yellowy base nude shade. And that's no primer, just on dry skin, and you can already see the color payoff. It's a pale cream shade with a little bit of a yellow undertone. Next up we have Force of Nature, again dry swatch, and this one is a light nude shade, and it has a little bit of a peachy undertone, even though it comes off a little bit more ashy on my skin tone. But if you mix this in with one of the deeper shades, you can get a deeper shade to use as a transition color if you're a deeper complexion. And this is the shade Dreamer, which is a warm medium tone brown. Again, dry swatches with a brush. These are live swatches, so I wanted you to see the pigmentation. Next up is Multitasker, which is a deep, kind of more chocolatey brown. It's an espresso brown. So you see it's a little bit warmer. There's a little bit more of a warm tone to it. These are the first 4 shades. Again, great pigmentation. They apply really well. You didn't see any loose eyeshadow falling all over the place. So those are the first 4 swatches. Then here's the second row with those pinky, more rosy, cool tone neutrals. Next up are the pinky rose tone cool shades, and this shade is Caregiver, which is a pale light pink, and I used a brand new brush for this. As you can see, this is a very light pink, and with pale tones you don't expect that great of a pigmentation, but look at that without primer. The pigmentation is great. You can see the light pink undertone. This shade now is Natural Beauty, which again is a mauve brown shade, and you can see the pinky purple undertones to this shade. Again, it looks a little bit more ashy on my skin tone, but you can blend it in with any of the other colors to deepen that up a little bit and make it a little bit more wearable. This shade is Mulberry, which is probably the only shade that has a little bit of trouble with the pigmentation. It comes off a little bit splotchy. This is a dusty mauve purple tone brown. As you can see, it comes off a little bit sheer in areas, but once you apply it over a primer, it works out really great. And this shade I would use mainly to deepen up a look or apply in the outer V area. So it actually, because I don't use it in this big of an area, it doesn't come off splotchy. It actually comes off really nicely and blends really well in a concentrated area. Then last up we have this deep plum color called Bombshell. It's a rich, dark, blackened purple shade. Again, this is a smoky shade. It's great for deepening up the outer V, giving a smoky look. And here are the 4 colors swatched again, with Best Friend probably being the most troublesome shade, if you want to call that troublesome. And then the last row, which are just regular neutral shades that you can use for any look. Now for the last 4 shades. First up is Super Mom, which is a pale ivory shade. And this is a great like matte vanilla shade. It's great for highlighting, great for the inner tear duct. Again, you can mix this color with other colors to lighten them up. Then we have the shade Wanderer, which works great in the crease area for me. This is my perfect transition shade, and it shows up a little bit lighter than it applies on my eyes. So you see the color, it seems a little bit lighter, but it's a great caramel brown color, perfect for blending in the crease. Then we have the shade Power Player, which is a taupey brown shade. So it has a lot of gray undertone to it. It's a really pretty shade. Great if you like to do taupey looks or gray toned looks. It would be great for a smoky eye as well as a transition shade. And then last up is the Fashionista shade, which is a sooty matte black, and this is a great shade. It's not too overly pigmented where it will overwhelm a look, but it's decently pigmented where you can deepen up a look, smoke it out without it being too crazy or too overwhelming, and it blends really well and seamlessly with other shades. So here are the last 4 shades in the palette. Now here I swatched all 12 colors over primer in a smaller swatch so you could see how they would apply normally under normal circumstances using them normally. As you can see, the light shades have great pigmentation, great color payoff over primer. It's really amazing how pigmented these are over primer. Here are the medium shades again. Again, this is my perfect shade. As you can see, over primer it deepens up a bit, so it actually matches my skin tone really well. These 3 shades are great for transition shades for help with blending. Then you have these deeper shades. Oh my god, these 2 shades are such rich, deep browns. These are perfect for any neutral look that you want to deepen up. Then here go the purpley shades. This one is the Best Friend shade, which was the one I was telling you has a little trouble. And if I zoom in a little bit more, you will see it isn't splotchy at all with the concentrated area and over primer. So that's what I meant by once you apply it on your eyes, you actually don't have an issue. And this rich burnt purple shade is so pretty. It's great for those deep purpley looks, really pretty. And then here is that black, which it looks a little deeper now when it's concentrated, like I was saying, but it's still not overly saturated where it's going to be trouble to blend out. And those are the 12 shades, all zoomed in, all swatched, over primer with a brush. I use a brush. I didn't use my finger. I used the same brush that we were using in the MAC 242 brush just to build up the color. And I used about 2 swipes to get that color pigmentation. So again, these are rich, beautiful shades. You see they aren't powdery, they don't just flake off. You see, even when I rub them, they don't really just fall off the skin like some eyeshadows can. Now Tarte says these eyeshadows are infused with the Amazonian clay, which gives it long wear and long lasting effects. It also has vitamin E, which is anti-inflammatory, emollient, and an antioxidant. And it has mineral pigments, which will soothe and soften the skin. Now, if you've ever used a Tarte eyeshadow, any of their Amazonian clay products, you know it has a really creamy, buttery texture to it. And I find that these eyeshadows reflect that completely. They're soft, they're creamy, they're smooth, they apply beautifully without being powdery. And that is the key thing I find with matte eyeshadows, that they can come off very powdery. And that is kind of virtue of the formula itself. For it to be a matte product, you don't really have too much of those binding agents in it that cause that slip and slide, and the mica that causes shimmer and shine in frost shadows, which makes them really easy to blend, but that gives them that high frost shine. So for a matte powder eyeshadow, it's harder to make it smooth and creamy and buttery, and also make it blendable and have it stick to the skin and adhere really well without like a primer or anything else. So I was expecting powdery loose eyeshadows, but Tarte did a great job. Whatever binding agent they used in this, it doesn't kick up, like your eyeshadows don't kick up dust. When you use your brush across the eyeshadow, it doesn't kick up like a ton of product, and then when you apply it, that means you won't get a ton of fallout. And I find that really like a great plus to these eyeshadows. And they also layer very well, so you can build up color without a bunch of fallout. So the eyeshadow itself sticks to your lid and sticks to whatever primer or even bare lids, but it also now sticks to each other, so it can stick to a layer that you already have down. It doesn't just fade away and blow out into nowhere. It actually sits on the skin, sits on each other. It's really blendable without being patchy or splotchy. And MAC eyeshadows can do that. Like when you start blending, they start fading out in patches, and it looks, some parts aren't coated, some parts are too intense. It gets crazy. So I love the formula of these eyeshadows. I think they did a really good job. The one thing I will mention is that when you apply these over a damp primer or like an oily lid, if there's any moisture, it can deepen the eyeshadow, so it's going to get a little bit darker, a little bit deeper. So I prefer to apply it over a dry base or a dry primer, like my MAC paint pots that dry down matte. I apply these over that matte base, and I don't get the deepening effect. But with the deepening effect, you can use these wet. I wouldn't wet my brush and dip it in there. I would pick up the eyeshadow, dampen the brush, and then use it wet. But I wouldn't dip it in here. And if you're gonna dip it in like a corner, so just in case it gets that hard coating, which I haven't noticed that this gets that hard shell over it, like this hard layer. But just be careful, I just don't trust it. You can use this as an eyeliner wet. You can also use these for eyebrows because they're neutral shades. So you can use these for your eyebrows. You can even use these for contouring if you're in a pinch. So that's the beauty about matte shades and neutral shades. They are so versatile. I really, really love this palette. And again, it's gonna suit anyone. Any of these shades you can use in any look. If you're using pinks, use the pink tones. If you're using neutrals, use the neutral tones. If you're using warm tones, use the warm tones. You can use the black, you can use the purple, it's so versatile. There's so many eyeshadows in here that you can just mix and match, and you can mix the eyeshadows together to get your perfect shade. So suppose like Wanderer is my perfect crease shade, a perfect blending shade, but if you're a little bit darker than me and you need a deeper blending crease shade, but you're too light for Dreamer, like Dreamer is too dark, mix the two and get a lighter shade. Mix them, they mix well together and they blend well together, so you can mix and match and get various shades out of this. So I absolutely love this palette. I truly recommend it. I think it is phenomenal. So when it debuts in January, early 2015, I definitely say grab this palette. It is worth every dime, and I'm glad I picked it up, even though I was wavering before. I was like, I don't know, but I am so glad I finally caved and got it, because I think this guy is a great addition to the neutral market. I think it knocks a lot of these eyeshadow palettes out the box. Like, it came with a variety of colors. Like, I don't have to pick up 5 different palettes to know that I have everything I need right here. So if I pick up a colorful palette and then I pick up this neutral palette, that's it. I'm set for a trip because I have all the neutrals that I could need here. And I think the only thing that you may be missing here is an orangey toned neutral, which a lot of people like orange toned neutrals, especially if you have a warmer complexion. But I think Dreamer and Wanderer kind of are substitutes, but a lot of people like that sunset orangey brown. So that's probably the only thing that is truly missing from this palette. But other than that, which I don't have an issue with because I love the colors in here and I don't really use orangey tones, I think this is the perfect neutral palette. And the matte shades, if you haven't tried mattes, if you're scared of mattes, if you think mattes are chalky and they're powdery, this guy will change your mind. It's a great matte palette, and it's a great all-inclusive palette, especially even for a beginner, because they're gonna need the shades in here. You know what I mean? And it would just round out anybody's collection. It will complement anybody's collection. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. Got, you know, an idea of the palette, saw the swatches, you know, gave it a thought or two. And yeah, until my next video, which will be soon, I will talk to you, and links will be below to my Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook page where you can follow me along. And more videos are yet to come, so if you aren't already subscribed, definitely hit the subscribe button. Favorite, share, and like as well, because that shows your support and helps me get out there in the YouTube universe. So yeah, I'll talk to you soon, guys. Love you. Bye.